Good morning everyone, welcome to another session of Live at the Waterhole. My name's Kenneth, I'll be your guide for today's session. I'm starting off here in sunny and warm Tembe Elephant Park. Hopefully we've got more exciting sightings for the rest of today, but for now it's wonderful to see the elephants going about their daily business. As always, just a reminder, it's a live and interactive show, so please feel free to send through your questions and comments. Adds a wonderful dynamic to the show, and I'll do my best to explain and answer them. It's wonderful to see most parts of the southern hemisphere, showing a bit of sunshine after the days of welcome rain. Everyone's always very excited when it starts to rain a bit, but after day 2 it gets a bit much. I think it's a bit more of cabin feeling. You can't really go explore or see anything amazing happening. I feel like the magic takes off a bit once the sun shines for those day or two. Well, we're going to leave our docile elephants a bit here and head over to Lentor, Kenya. Oh, there we go. A very photogenic baboon posing for us in front of the camera. And a few peaceful zebra having a drink. Off to a bit of a trot away from the waterhole, kicking up a bit of dust. It seems that something's got everyone's attention in the distance. Probably nothing too important. And so the baboons are looking rather calm for a change. Jax, you'd like to know how often we see zebras here and what's the frequency? From time to time, I must say we don't often see big herds of zebras at Lentor, but they are certainly around. If you had to just compare, for example, Adonio or Lentor, I would say Adonio is a much more open area, which would lead me to believe there's quite good grazing in the area, and we often see large congregations of zebras there, so there's probably quite a bit of a bigger population as opposed to here at Lentor. Also, just on that topic of open habitat, zebras often thrive in more open habitats. Where it's quite thick, they tend to be predated on a bit by lions. Lions are able to ambush them much more effectively when it's thick and overgrown. So hence why we maybe don't see them as often. We do know there are certainly lions in the area, and also see impala from time to time. But Lentor certainly is quite a different waterhole. I think each waterhole has its own uniqueness on certain animals that tend to come to it. For example, I think Lentor is great for looking at birds. Riley, you'd like to know why male baboons have those massive colourful butts. So the male baboon's bum is not as colourful as the females. The females have very large, well-developed bums that get very bright pink or red when they're in estrus or ready to mate. Kind of signals them to males and advertises it to males. Whereas male baboons are generally always very dull pink and quite a small, not very developed bum, but certainly an interesting adaptation. In the world of baboons, I think the mandrill would be your best example of a more colourful bum. But even then, once again, it is heavily reduced in the male. Theo, you're asking, are baboons more closely related to monkeys or apes? So off the bat, they're much more closely related to monkeys. The fact that they have a tail really puts them on that side of the fence. All your apes don't have tails. So they are part of the old world monkeys, as we call them. Your new world monkeys are from the South Americas and that part of the world. So they kind of split it when they speak New World and Old World due to continental drift, etc. But yeah, being Old World monkeys, that means they have tails, longer snouts, and a bit more of a dog-like face. Your apes, like gorillas or chimpanzees in Africa, don't have tails, and their body shape is quite differently if you see how they walk around, etc. Quite an impressive impala male that's come in here to drink. The impalas of the East African subspecies, or gene pool, have these very large, impressive spreading horns. I find them quite attractive if you ever compare them a bit to the ones in the southern Africa. They look quite differently. These ones certainly look very stately and impressive. Funny to watch these antics these young baboons always get up to. You can see there's a bit of a fight now going on in the tree. All the sticks raining down from above and a bit of shouting taking place. Adults don't seem too worried. They'll leave the youngsters to get up to their antics. But quite a peaceful scene here with the zebras and the impala. The young baboons are doing their best to disrupt it, that's for sure. Sky, you had a question regarding if baboons hold grudges or plan revenge. So, of course, revenge or grudges are very much human emotions, and must always be careful to the depths of which human emotions run on not necessarily present in animals, or they don't feel emotions as deeply as we do. They obviously do experience them in different ways, but yeah, revenge and grudges are quite an in-depth form of that. But of course, baboons do have excellent memories and a strong sense of social relationships, as we can see in their large baboon troops. They'll remember who's treated them well, who threatened them, who outranks who. So if they avoid someone or they later support an ally in a fight, it can look a bit like revenge, but it's more really social strategy, not so much emotionally driven payback. They're just responding to past experiences in a very practical way that suits their survival, of course. Zara asking if bachelor herds of young males ever challenge dominant males with females. So they won't challenge as a group. They'll all be competing in one area and dominating. So the dominant male will chase subdominant or males he's beaten out of an area and kind of keep a close eye on them. But it's important to note that just because he's the dominant male does not mean he will mate with all females. There are often some sneakier males on the periphery that will sneak in and still mate with females. So even though we're used to seeing a dominant male always stick with the herd, and it's he's kind of won the right to have that as his herd, not every lamb born is necessarily his offspring. Bit of a rotten deal, but yeah, so he spends a lot of time fighting and defending, and while he's doing that, he does often lose the opportunity to always mate with all these females. But certainly, it's not easy being an impala. Pax, you're asking if impalas can outrun cheetahs, or do they just confuse them with jumps? So they definitely not be able to outrun a cheetah. Maybe in the short game they might get a bit of a lead, but the cheetah is definitely faster and will catch them. That being said, impalas tend to stick to more thicker habitats, not so much the open plains as much, where your gazelles are more present. But for example, in Kruger, we have cheetahs prey predominantly on impalas in the Kruger National Park, so they will try ambush them there. But an impala's best defense is definitely its ability to jump high or over obstacles, and its tight turns. That's generally where it will outwit or beat the cheetah. If it can turn sharply and change direction. The cheetah's not great at changing direction so abruptly. Sorry about that, we just lost a bit of connection there by Lentor. Hopefully our woodlands kingfishers are waiting for us. Okay, we're going to pop on over to Tau. There's a few things to see there. My favorite, a good selection of birds here at Tau. We've got a grey heron, some white-faced whistling ducks. I assume a knob-billed duck there next to them, and some red-knobbed coots doing their things. I'm sure there's more birds lurking, but that's what I can see off the bat. Yep, definitely a knob-billed duck there over on the right. Kai, you were asking if impalas can really jump over bus when escaping predators. Easily so. Impalas can jump up to 3 to 4 meters up into the air. They are very acrobatic in that sense, and they can jump quite high. That being said, cats can also jump quite high. I have seen footage of leopards grabbing impalas out of mid-air. But yeah, impalas are incredibly agile and quick. This speaks to their, well, that's probably one of the most plentiful antelopes throughout the African continent, and I think that speaks very highly of their survival abilities. We're going to leave our peaceful birds and head on over to Tembe, some more elephant action. Ah, yes, of course, having a great mud bath today. I'm sure that's just what's needed with that hot summer sun beating down. I had a nice question. Why do herons fly with their neck curled up in an S shape? So the reason behind that, herons and egrets being very closely related or part of the same family, but they curl their necks into that S shape because it keeps their long neck more balanced, and that allows them to be much more stable in flight. If it was stretched out while they were flying, to be a bit heavy and unstable and throw them off balance. But when they're feeding, they also fold it in because it gives them the ability to strike very quickly and catch the food they're hunting for. It looks a lot like a spring that can shoot forward in seconds. So that S shape is really about balance in flight and speed while hunting. It's kind of like carrying a long stick. If you want to strike something, you hold it first close to your body and then you shoot out instead of trying to hold it far away from your body and still poke at things. And Riley asking, why do African elephants have such enormous ears compared to Asian elephants? So we had a similar question like this today. It's always a good question. But if we look at our African elephants and the conditions in which they live, the savannas, etc., their habitat tends to be a lot more open and sparse. Of course, there are always overgrown or thick areas, but the majority of the habitat's a lot more open, and like I said, it's hot. So they use those massive ears as a form of cooling and or heat or thermoregulation. Those ears are full of blood vessels, and when they flap their ears back and forth, they essentially wash cool air over those blood vessels, and it helps keep them cool. And like I said, their habitat allows them, because it's much more open, to have big ears like that. Whereas if you go over to Asian elephants, they live in much more tropical or temperate areas in Asia and very thick jungles and forests. So the need for such big ears is redundant. They don't need to flap and try to keep themselves cool. They live in very shaded or overgrown conditions, and also at the same time having big ears in a habitat like that, moving through lots of branches and trees, it's a bit of a hindrance. And if you wanted to see an example closer to savanna elephants, you can see that disparity with African forest elephants. Their ears are much smaller than their savanna counterparts, and that's once again due to habitat and requirements. So, interesting. So there's always good elephant action here at Tembe, but it's definitely not called Tembe Elephant Park for nothing. I did see the one elephant chasing the poor geese out of the way when it came for a bit of a drink. It can always sometimes be a little bullyish when at the waterhole, but I guess when you're that big, there's nothing saying you can't be like that. Also looks like a grey heron that flew in there. Well, we're going to leave these peaceful areas again and head over to Aldornio. Well, it looks like our eland have not moved much from yesterday. They are clearly making the most of this fresh green grazing that is growing around the waterhole here. Clearly very palatable and nutritious. They are enjoying it quite a bit. We can see quite a few lying down and processing the cud.
Join me at Mabulla Private Game Reserve from 6 to 11 May 2026 for a 5-night private safari for just 6 guests.
Just incredibly exciting.
Enjoy guided walks, take part in rhino conservation efforts, and explore Mabulla's beautiful landscapes from open plains to rocky hills, alive with birds, animals, and vibrant plant life.
Join our expert guides at dawn for a live, immersive safari as the bush comes to life.
Found ourselves a chameleon, and look how he's changed color.
Every sunrise brings new discoveries.
Pound for pound, a leopard is one of the strongest cats around.
Ask questions, share your thoughts, and connect with nature live and in real time.
Great excitement, great happiness.
Start your day with adventure. Safari, wine, and waterfalls. The ultimate African adventure. Sip South Africa's finest wines. Experience a world-class safari among Africa's iconic wildlife. And stand in front of Victoria Falls, one of the natural wonders of the world. All this can be yours with Wild Earth Travel, where Africa comes alive.
The meter of height on him. And Jonah, you're asking if do elephants truly mourn their dead like we do? So no, they don't mourn as much in the human sense. They do show very real complex responses to death that's noticeable. You'll often see them stopping at a body or touching it gently with their trunks, and they sometimes stay nearby for hours or even days. They also appear to recognize bones and skulls of elephants long after their death. So what we can assume from this is that they do understand loss, or the strong emotional bonds they have between certain elephants. But yeah, once again, being careful not to project these human feelings as we feel it onto them. It is certainly a grief-like behavior, but more likely shaped more by memory and social connection rather than a ritual or a belief system that humans have. But it does show how complex elephants can be. No surprise there. Lena was asking, can an adult African elephant really run faster than most people? Certainly so, Leela. Without even a challenge, elephants will catch up to you very quickly. The big thing is, it's not so much about how quickly they can move their legs or how quickly they move, but if it's such a large animal, with a bit of effort and they get going and those legs start covering massive distances, or large distances, sorry, they can quickly cover a distance shortly. But that being said, an elephant can easily run at about 40 kilometers or so. I think Usain Bolt would be the only human with a chance of escaping an elephant. The vast majority of the rest of us would unfortunately not have a chance. Also, if an elephant is chasing you, we unfortunately generally have to run around bushes. They can run straight through most obstacles in the pursuit of you. Very interesting question that came through from Nova, asking if elephants recognize themselves in the mirror. So obviously this research was done on a number of species. I'm sure you've seen videos on the internet with the way certain animals react to themselves with mirrors. But when it came to elephants, they were one of the very few animals that did recognize themselves. When the researchers gave them a mirror, they didn't really treat it like another elephant, but they were observed using it to, in a way, kind of inspect their bodies, sometimes touching marks that they maybe weren't necessarily aware of, but with that mirror they could. So it was quite an interesting project that was done. But that type of test kind of suggests quite a bit of a high level of self-awareness, which is only rarely reflected in a handful of species: humans, dolphins, and great apes. But I think if one's ever spent quite a bit of time observing elephants in the wild, you will quickly notice they are very aware creatures. Sometimes they will engage in mock feeding behavior or pretend like they're not observing you, but they are always keeping their head or eyes in a position that they can keep an eye on a vehicle looking at them. It's all a bit of subterfuge, so you always have to be very careful and respectful around elephants. They are not simply large lumbering herbivores that don't understand their environment. This is certainly one of the bigger elephants I've seen in a long time, and I know we often see quite a few elephants around here at Tembe, but it's kind of nice having that scale reference between this bull and some of the other elephants. Really goes to show how big a bull elephant can get when he's in his prime. Of course, this also has to do with genetics. Not all elephants will necessarily reach such a large and impressive size. Just as it is the same with the tusks, we can see as although this bull is quite large in size, his tusks are not necessarily too long or impressive, or he doesn't come across as a tusker, but often sometimes there's tuskers that are quite small in stature. Theo, you had quite an interesting question asking what exactly happens when a bull elephant goes into must. The mythical term often used by many guides, but a very interesting and confusing thing, as it's only really elephants that have this behavior. But essentially, when a bull elephant goes into must, his body goes through quite a large hormonal surge, especially in the hormone testosterone. So during this time, a thick oily fluid drips a bit from the temporal glands. You can kind of see those marks on the side of his head. They often leak urine, and continuously. I always use that as a way to kind of tell if a bull elephant is in must, if he's dripping urine. And quite a strong scent. It's not exactly a very pleasant scent if you catch wind of it. But behavior-wise, they become very confident, assertive. They'll walk around with quite a bit of a powerful swagger, their heads raised high, and they start to actively seek out breeding females or receptive females. And even younger or normally submissive bulls in the state of must can all of a sudden start to dominate older males. That's how high their confidence goes. So quite a natural phase, usually lasting a few weeks. They aren't automatically aggressive, they're just a lot less predictable. So things that normally wouldn't seem to be an issue, all of a sudden he may snap and do something he normally wouldn't do. So that's actually the bigger danger when people speak of must. Anyway, on that exciting note, we're going to head over to Kenya and see what's waiting for us there. Awesome, we've got some grazing hippos here at Mahali Mzuri. I need to practice that name. Anyway, the hippo's looking very docile. Looks a bit overcast, so definitely good grazing weather for them. The local lawnmower is hard at work keeping the grass or the lawn manicured and clean. Those generally do favour short palatable grasses. They won't necessarily go for those large bunches of grass that we're seeing. I was reading up a bit about the name Mahali Mzuri. Means beautiful place in Swahili. I think that's very fitting for the location we're in now, certainly living up to that name. So I'm not very familiar with Swahili. I'm a bit more familiar with some of the native Southern African languages like Zulu. Quite nice to see these hippos just going about their business quite peacefully. It's nice to also of this close-up view of them grazing. Don't often really see hippos doing much when they're in the water. They're a bit obstructed from view. Mira, excuse me, you were asking how much does a full-grown hippo weigh? About 3 tons. So a full-grown hippo usually weighs about between 1.5 to 3 tons. So they can push the scales there. I think that would be one of your bigger, more dominant males. But I would also say that's probably on the extreme end of things. I think most of your adult hippos tend to average out closer to 2 tons. Maybe makes it sound smaller, but that's obviously still an enormous animal. And then adding to that how quickly they can move on land, that they are incredibly quick and agile. One would not expect that from that with short stubby legs and that mass of weight. But you could essentially maybe liken it to a modern day tank, how quickly a modern day tank can move, although it's quite a big cumbersome thing. Quite a similar concept. Milo asking, can hippos close their ears and nostrils completely underwater? Yes, of course, that's how they hold their breath, so they're able to shut their nostrils. It's almost like a valve, but the muscles there close the nostrils, and their ears also fold and close and keep them airtight, obviously due to all the time they spend underwater. They wouldn't want to get an ear infection or something like that. And it's the same often when you see them pop up, there's a spray of mist, and that's them breathing out of their nostrils again, and that bit of spray that you see. But yeah, more than capable of. They can actually do it in their sleep as well. So often hippos are able to sleep underwater and pop up for breath and then pop back down, all while staying asleep. Denise, you're asking if hippos are muscular or fat in their appearance. So although they do look a bit rounded, they're incredibly muscular. If you think about the majority of their diet, it's lean greens. So not too much things to make them fat. You might maybe see a bit of a difference in a captive hippo in a zoo, and maybe foraging on things it wouldn't necessarily eat in nature. But yeah, the most of their bulk is dense muscle. Specifically in the shoulders, the neck and the jaws, and they've got to lift that heavy head and the bite force, etc., and that's generated if they bite onto something. But a lot of the muscles are at the front there. They do have quite a thick layer of skin, which also adds to that appearance, but that also assists with insulation. Of course, they do have a layer of fat, as most mammals would, and it helps with buoyancy as well. But they are nothing like your seals that were used to having that blubbery, or whales for that matter, having that blubbery type fat. So yeah, quite a stark contrast, pardon me. But of course, a lot of the more aquatic environments in which we find hippos in Africa, it's not super cold, so they don't need blubber so much to survive, and they don't spend their entire lifetime in water, so they can go out for thermoregulation. Papa, you're asking if pygmy hippos are just smaller versions or different species. Essentially smaller versions, but they are a completely different species. So while they're related to the common hippos, pygmy hippos have evolved to quite a different life. It's quite similar to our discussion on the savanna elephants or African elephants versus the Asian elephants. But yeah, your pygmy hippos have evolved for a life in dense forests and jungles, compared to big rivers and lakes where we find the common hippopotamus. They're much more solitary, and they spend a lot less time in water. Obviously have a much slimmer build with longer legs for moving through the vegetation, since they don't spend as much time in water, and their habitat is quite different. But I think one would be forgiven for thinking a pygmy hippo is maybe just a baby hippo. They're also known for being a bit more aggressive. I can't comment too much on that in personal experience. I've just heard and read about that. But they are quite interesting animals. I've seen them a few times in zoos. You don't often see pygmy hippos. They are very endangered and threatened, unfortunately due to habitat loss and poaching. Luna, you're asking why hippos have such thin legs for their enormous bodies. I think it's maybe a bit more of a visual misnomer that their legs look quite thin and unstable, or thin because they're big body, but those legs are very short and stout, which is generally indicative of legs that are, well, short and stubby for carrying quite a heavy mass. If you had to compare maybe a hippo's size and weight to that of a giraffe, a hippo is by far heavier, and to deal with that adaptation, their legs are much shorter and stout to carry that weight compared to a giraffe. Even though a giraffe looks much larger, it doesn't weigh as much as a hippo. But yeah. Anyway, with that being said, our hippo is now doing a disappearing act on us. We're going to head on over to Elephant Pan for a surprise. And the surprise was elephants. I'm sure no one saw that coming. It's looking wonderfully green here at Elephant Pan. I think the last time I remember watching this cam was as the mopani trees were starting to go green. It was nice to see this lush carpet of grass around here. You can also see a towering giraffe moving between the mopanis and the horizon. What a pretty part of the world. I think the mopani tree is one of my favorite trees. must say, I always thought this elephant pan was an idyllic spot, but even more so now. It really looks quite beautiful at the moment. And this is generally the image that comes to mind when I think of the festive or Christmas holidays. Certainly a unique thing when you live or grow up in Africa. This is generally how your Christmases look. In fact, you were asking if can losing a matriarch cause chaos in an entire herd? Of course, it's quite a. I think it would be quite a chaotic time for a herd. You might experience many animals going off on their own, starting smaller herds. Of course, it wouldn't necessarily be a very formal process of voting or anything like that. One of the older daughters may take over from her mother, the matriarch, but I think a very chaotic and stressful time for a herd. I wanted to say emotional, but obviously in the sense of elephant emotions. But yes, it would be very stressful, especially if there wasn't another old enough female with knowledge and experience to take over leading their herd, which would essentially result in that herd maybe splitting up or falling apart and disappearing essentially. I must say, these elephants are not feeling too photogenic today, hiding with their heads behind the bushes and drinking in private over there. Quite a stark contrast to sometimes how this pan can look. Sometimes it's completely encircled by elephant herds, but I do think it's indicative of there being quite a bit of water elsewhere at many other natural pans in the bush. I'm a big fan of all these pans that appear in summer. It's just great for bird life and seeing some of the rarest species. Popping up to each pan when you're on a game drive feels like a bit of a lucky packet. You never know what you're going to find there. Sometimes you even find a sneaky leopard or lion.
See you out on safari.
At Wild Earth, we believe every story has the power to create change. That's why we've launched the Wild Earth Impact Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to conservation and social impact. By showcasing conservation stories, we can change lives, protect nature, and empower communities. We have partnered with Empowers Africa to accept tax-deductible donations from US donors. Your donation will help fund critical programs that support our mission. Join us and be part of the change. Join our expert guides at dawn for a live, immersive safari as the bush comes to life.
Found ourselves a chameleon, and look how he's changed color.
Every sunrise brings new discoveries.
Pound for pound, a leopard is one of the strongest cats around.
Ask questions, share your thoughts, and connect with nature, live and in real time.
Great excitement, great happiness.
Start your day with adventure.
And see what's waiting for us there. It's quite nice to see these kudus sneaking in for a drink. I'm such a fan of this Maritania waterhole. It always feels like the mystery is right on the edge of the thick vegetation. You never know what's gonna pop out. And all the years I've watched this camera, there's a number of interesting species that pop up. Sasha, you were asking how many bird species can one realistically spot on a single African safari? So of course it depends on where you go for your safari. Each location is unique in its habitat, etc., and what's there, or the diversity. Also depending on whether you come in winter or summer. Generally in summer there's a lot more birds around and migrants have arrived. But if I just have to speak from my own experiences here in the Kruger region or the Kruger National Park, there's I think the total list is roughly 400 to 500 birds. Obviously quite a few of those are rarities, so you can't realistically count on them, but you could see them. But I think on a single safari you could look at about 300 or 400 or so birds, depending on how hard your bird watching or how good your guide is. So it's certainly possible, but depends on a number of factors. Often in South Africa when we have big birding day, where everyone competes to see how many birds they can see in a day, many teams rack up scores of 300 to 400 birds in a single 24 hours, which is quite an accomplishment. It's a lot of birding for one day, and that's all within a 50 kilometer radius, so even then in a bit of a limited area. But once again, it's all down to the diversity of habitats that are present in the area you're bird watching in. Gage, you're asking if a beginner birder could rack up hundreds of lifers on one African trip. Definitely, that would not be too hard of a push to find that many lifers. If it's one of your first African trips, I think the lifers will come hard and fast. You'll be struggling to keep up, but yeah, you could easily see about 100 birds in a day or two. That being said, this depends on your level of birding. If you've got a guide with you, I think that's certainly possible. But even if you were quite a beginner, I think in a week or so you would definitely find about 100 lifers. There's an insane amount of bird diversity on the African continent. Though I often catch myself dreaming of birding in South America or Asia. There's, if not more, diversity in those areas. I can really hear quite a few birds just calling at this waterhole here at Kwamaratane. You can actually see some oxpeckers on that kudu bowl doing their best to find some ticks. So those would be red-billed oxpeckers, and not because I can see them, but just going off the knowledge that that part of the world only really gets red-billed oxpeckers. There aren't yellow-billed oxpeckers that occur there. See the kudus are enjoying all the fresh leaves that are growing at the moment. Kai, you're asking what's so special about seeing the bizarre shoebill stalk in the wild. Just gonna switch on over to elephant pan before I finish answering that. These kudu are slowly moving off, so we'll watch the ellies for a bit. But essentially, most birders have quite a strict moral code of attempting to see all the birds they see in the wild. Obviously, it's your own discretion, but most people try to see the birds for their life lists in the wild. Otherwise, you could go to any zoo or aviary collection and tick off lots of birds as lifers. Maybe feels a bit like cheating, but like I said, it's a personal decision. But seeing a shoebill in the wild is quite special. It's a bit like stepping back in time. They almost appear prehistoric. They look a bit like a T-Rex from Jurassic Park, with their large bill that looks quite sharp and intimidating, their eyes that give off a bit of an intense stare, and also they're just incredibly rare and hard to find. They live in very remote swamps that keep them safe, but also very hard to get to, and they're very good at standing perfectly still, so it doesn't get easier. And they're known for striking with explosive speed, and they often hunt fish such as lungfish, which I think in itself is also another cool thing to see. So maybe a shoebill expedition essentially is a safari of lots of interesting things. I think it's probably the holy grail in a way of seeing or going to a very wild and untouched area to look for these animals. You won't find them very easily, or birds. Well, I see our stumpy-tailed elephant has disappeared. Just the 3 of these ones mucking around now. Interestingly enough, they've come to drink out of the freshwater reservoir, but I have a feeling it's actually not on at the moment, since there's enough water around here. But old habits die hard. I think also we're quite used to the taste of fresh water, so it's a bit of a preference in a way. No, Stumpy is back. Seems like they're just mucking around and doing young teenager things around the watering hole today. A nice question coming through from Kai, asking what's the main difference between greater kudus and lesser kudus. So it's an interesting topic. Most people will not really see a lesser kudu. They're very rare and found in only very specific habitats or parts of Africa. The majority of kudus when you go on safari are always greater kudus. So it's not necessarily an animal you would actually see, and you wouldn't see it if you came to southern Africa, and only in a few parts of East Africa can you really see them in the central parts. But nonetheless, they do look strikingly different. So your main difference between a greater and a lesser kudu is the size and the habitat. Greater kudu obviously are much larger, thanks to their namesake, and they prefer wooded savanna and bushveld, so a bit more open. The males have very long and dramatic spiraling horns. And your lesser kudu, on the other hand, they're smaller. The name makes sense for that, but they're much more delicate and live in drier, thornier scrub in East Africa. So the stripes tend to be a bit finer and their horns are shorter and tighter. I myself have only rarely actually seen one in a zoo as a young boy, but yeah, could be nice to see something like that in the wild one day. Parker, you're asking if an elephant's damaged trunk can heal. So no, once it's severed, or severed quite severely, I see there's quite a few elephants now at the back there starting to creep in, so we might have a bit of a big party here later. But yeah, if the trunk is severely severed, it will never rejoin. There was a sneaky crocodile here not too long ago. He's lurking somewhere, so maybe if we're lucky he will pop up nicely. I do see a few bubbles there, so I'm not sure if he's maybe about in the center of the screen or so. But yeah, that's probably the ultimate game of hide and seek, trying to figure out where a crocodile is. But yeah, Harper, so we've seen it a couple times on the show, where we see an elephant with a damaged trunk. So if the cut is too deep, it will never rejoin, essentially. And sometimes we even see trunks that are completely severed. So it does not regrow anything, it's a permanent injury. and it obviously can cause problems. They're still able to survive. It just depends how or where the cut takes place, on the trunk close to the mouth. But even then, I've seen elephants with very short trunks surviving. Obviously, by no means is their life easy, but they are able to survive. It just depends where they find themselves in the protected area. Zara, you were asking if elephants use their trunks to snorkel underwater. They most certainly do. Often when you see them crossing deep rivers, and also sometimes on some of the cams, we see them really having a deep swim, and all of a sudden they almost disappear. All you see is their trunk sticking out. But yeah, normally when they're doing a river crossing and it gets quite deep, eventually you'll only really see the top of their head and their trunk sticking out, which they use to breathe while they keep swimming. It's very cool, kind of like a submarine. I think our crocodile is playing hard to get, but we'll keep up our vigil, see if he... Oh, there we go, there was quite a big splash. I think he must be hunting fish in that shallow water at the back there. So now there his head is sticking out. Probably Julia, the big old girl. Can't see the full head sticking out, but it's definitely a big enough crocodile. I imagine she's on the hunt for catfish in there that are moving around. Catfish do make up quite a large proportion of the crocodile's diet. I also saw a black crate moving in the back of the reeds there, but I don't think we're going to see it very easily, just small glimpses. Yeah, this is more than likely Julia. This is quite a big crocodile, so I think that assumption was correct. I don't know what else she's up to. I'm sure she's trying to figure out where the catfish are. Obviously they've got various receptors on their snout where they can pick up vibrations and movement in the water. Hence why you really do not want to be in the water when there's a crocodile around. They'll find you. Quite an impressive specimen. Hopper, you were asking why are crocodiles often referred to as living fossils from the dinosaur era. Just off the bat, very simply, it's due to the fact that they've barely changed over millions of years. Their body shape and type has been around. So if you compared fossils from the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, it's almost identical to modern day crocodiles. It was just the size that really changed. But yeah, their body design essentially hasn't really changed for about 100 or 200 million years. it's quite early on. They've essentially had this very perfect setup. Powerful jaws, armor-plated skin, eyes and nostrils on top of the head, and a body that is perfectly adapted for ambushing, which is also propelled by that tail. And the dinosaurs might have come and gone, but crocodiles didn't need to change after those extinction events. They kind of just kept ticking on, and it suited them perfectly. So yeah, if you look at a Nile crocodile today, you're looking at something very similar to what existed alongside dinosaurs. But I think Julie has now given us the slurp, so we are going to pop on back to Elephant Pan. Hopefully that elephant party is going well. There we go. Our elephants are just repositioning a bit. So I had a little bit of microphone issues there. I must say they're looking a little aware or alert. I don't know if they're just still looking for their preferred drinking or bathing spot, but doesn't look like anyone's had too much of a wild swim yet. Ronan, you were asking how fast can a crocodile sprint on land for short distances? So yeah, of course crocodiles are very much short distance runners or sprinters. They cannot maintain a steady pace, but that's what once again suits that ambush-like lifestyle. Very short distances they can move or sprint quite fast, up to 12 to 14 kilometers per hour. Obviously that doesn't compare to some other land mammals, but once again that's quite quick. You are going to be hard pressed to outrun that if it's chasing you on land, and they can even go past that in a bit more of a sudden burst if they've got a bit of water to propel themselves with. But of course this is literally only for a few seconds. It's kind of their defense to get back into the water very quickly, or to quickly get out the water to grab something that's a bit further back and then head back into the water with their prey. Mira, you're asking if African elephants form lifelong bonds in their family herds. Absolutely, of course they do. Many of these, well, if you think how long it takes for an elephant to grow and develop, it's many years that they spend together. So they are bonds that will last a lifetime for them. I think it's obviously a bit different in the case of younger males. They are ostracized and chased away after a certain age, and they have to go be bachelors. Of course, they then, in their more solitude or their solitary life, they form bonds with other elephant bulls that they associate with and spend time together with. But yeah, you can often see it when elephants get together. There's quite a bit of excitement in the way they greet each other. But yeah, fortunately the young elephant bulls get a bit of the worst end of the stick. Mahesh, you are incredibly correct. It's a very idyllic sighting. It's wonderful having that blue or slightly overcast sky reflecting and the elephants. It really shows how quiet the water is. It's quite a special time. I could easily imagine myself in a camping chair with a cold beverage and a book. But we'll leave this peace and quiet and head over to some excitement by Serengeti. Like I said, our peace and quiet will be disrupted now, and we'll watch the antics of these creative primates. Looks like they're foraging a bit at the water's edge. Assume mainly for insects. And the rest of it looks relatively like grass. I don't think there's many tubers for them to dig out. I don't know why we've got funny luck when I am watching baboons. They only stay around for a finite amount of time and then disappear very quickly. I see there's still one or two there. I see we've got the mommy squad with their two baby baboons there, looking very cute and friendly. Ronan, you're asking if Chacma baboons are known as the largest and most aggressive type. As far as I'm aware, generally, I haven't got too much experience with the baboons a bit further north and east, the olive baboons, etc. But as far as I'm aware, the Chacma baboon is known for being quite large and aggressive or intimidating. I think I would
Join our expert guides at dawn for a live, immersive safari as the bush comes to life.
Found ourselves a chameleon, and look how he's changed color.
Every sunrise brings new discoveries.
Pound for pound, a leopard is one of the strongest cats around.
Ask questions, share your thoughts, and connect with nature live and in real time.
Great excitement, great happiness.
Start your day with adventure. Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime? Wild Earth Travel's newsletter is your passport to a magical journey. Explore exclusive travel options featuring special offers at stunning Wild Earth locations and all hosted by your favorite presenters. Don't miss out. Head over to our website and subscribe to the Wild Earth Travel newsletter today and stay in the know on all our unforgettable adventures. Wild Earth Travel, where Africa comes alive.
Even know what they're capable of or what learned behavior they've been exposed to. So if they've learned to associate vehicles with food, then they will definitely hop in and grab it or steal it. So I don't like to take chances. If they haven't learned that, they probably wouldn't know. But of course, baboons are incredibly curious by nature, so they do figure out things quite quickly. That's why they often become, unfortunately, nuisances in rest camps or lodges where they know there's food. They realize it's an easy meal and make a mission getting hold of it. Finn, you were asking if females play a bigger role in decision making in some baboon species. I don't think necessarily. I think generally the males make a lot of the decision making. And I think that goes across the board. We see it in most primates. There's always generally a dominant male leading the troop and calling the shots. Of course, there will be a social hierarchy between the different females, but I do think at the end of the day, the male baboon is the kingpin. The dominant male primate will be the kingpin. Baboons in this example, but I think across the board as well. Aria, you're asking if linking Madikwe to Pilanesberg would help with the elephant or with elephant migration issues. It certainly would go a long way to mitigating these issues. Essentially, in the perfect world, all of our reserves would not have fences and animals could travel as they saw fit or desired. But we generally put fences up to protect them from getting into urban areas and getting themselves hurt or causing human-animal conflict. And once again, fences go a long way in keeping poachers out. But yeah, if they were able to establish a corridor between Madikwe and Pilanesberg, that is on the cards, and I know a lot of people are trying their best and planning to do it, but it is a very complex matter because the distance between Madikwe and Pilanesberg it's not a small distance, it's quite a large distance. I think it's about 100 k's or so. I'll check my numbers on that, but the complex matter between is there's privately owned land between, there's communities, people living, and all of this would need to be resolved. People would need to be moved, they'd have to be given new places to live or carry on their lives, and it's not a simple thing of just uprooting people and moving them elsewhere, especially if they've been there for generations or they've got livelihoods. So it's quite a complex matter, but it has been done previously and many times across Africa. It just unfortunately takes time to deal with these complex matters, but I think it would be a very cool day if Pilanesberg and Madikwe were one larger park and a larger conservation area. Oh, these Ellies are up to a lot of interesting social behavior. They're not too worried about drinking or feeding. They seem to be much more set on interacting and play fighting. It seems like the one on the right is broken off a bit just to come do his own thing. Well, we're going to pop on over to Serendela, a bit more closer up action. Well, there's our local friendly hippo resident having a nice splash. We always see him floating around here. Something woke him up a bit there. Always love the way that he lies at a bit of an angle. Obviously the water's a bit shallow to completely submerge himself, so he makes do. Certainly looks comfortable. Jade, you were asking if hippos allow fish and birds to clean parasites from their bodies. They certainly do. Obviously we don't really witness or see the fish doing this, but it's been documented quite a bit. Obviously it helps if the water's a bit cleaner or there's better visibility, then you could probably see it. But you'll also often see oxpeckers on a hippo's body gleaning for ticks and other parasites. Also removing dead skin cells, etc. So yeah, between the fish and the oxpeckers, they've got their own personal spa team supporting them. You can see a bit of a water, well, it looks like a water bucket at the back there. Looks like one female. I can't see any others. Although I could be mistaken, this might actually be an Inyala. Seems like all will be revealed shortly. It is a young male Inyala. I wonder what spooked him there. He seemed very calm for a second. I just get very excited when I see calm animals suddenly getting very active or alert. You never know what could be lurking nearby. This young Inyala looks very on edge, but I don't think he's going to stick around to find out why. Mariska, you're asking if people stay in water excuse me, for a long time, and if so, how long? Generally, essentially from sunrise to sunset is where they'll spend most of their day. look, it's not a golden rule that they will stay in the water the whole time, but they generally prefer to be in the water. It's obviously cooling, so it's a good way to beat the heat of the African day. They obviously perspire quite a bit, etc., being out and away from water, so they want to try to keep cool and keep their body temperature down. Also, of course, the sun's UV rays are quite harsh on their skin. Hippos do secrete substances, that kind of pinky red substance we sometimes see on them, which acts a bit like sunscreen for them and also has antimicrobial properties. But yeah, you'll often see a hippo generally from sunrise. You'll see them starting to get back into the water, and you'll only really see them start heading out at sunset to go and graze. But of course, sometimes they will be seen basking next to the water, sleeping, or even sometimes in the middle of the day we'll see them grazing. So it's not a set rule, but generally they prefer to be spending the majority of their time in the water during the day. The Cerundella propeller. I like that name. Well done, Fred. It'll be interesting to see if this hippo stays here during the wet summer season now. Obviously, as the water holes and pans fill up, hippos sometimes use it as a highway to get back to rivers or other areas and other dams or water bodies. So it would not surprise me if this guy, or this hippo bull, has got grand dreams of finding his own hippo herd. So he may move off one day, but I must say I think he is quite happy here. But I'm sure he would like to have a few hippo females of his own. So we may see him go in search of this one day. Well, if he's clever, he just needs to advertise a bit and bring them back to his special waterhole he's found here. Mira, you're asking how much vegetation can an adult hippo eat in one night? So it's generally about 35 to 40 kilograms of grass in a single night. Maybe it doesn't sound as impressive as it should, but if you think how if you think of how heavy grass is, that's obviously quite a massive amount of grass. And yeah, they'll obviously do this after they leave at sunset and spend the evening grazing throughout the areas near their water source. But what's quite interesting is, despite eating that much, hippos are actually still selective grazers. As I mentioned earlier, they tend to crop grass very short, and they tend to focus on shorter grasses. So they won't just bulldoze any grass that they come across. It's more, white rhinos tend to be bulk grazers like that aren't as selective. But we're going to pop on over a bit to Jackie's dam. It sounds like there's a bit of action going on there. Seems like we've got a fishing hole that's caught an unfortunate fish of sorts. I assume it's likely a catfish, but still very cool to see him. You can see him picking it quite clean. really picking every last bit of fish off of those bones, not leaving anything behind. Fish eagles are incredibly opportunistic. As much as they are good fishermen, they will grab anything they can scavenge, or they'll even hunt other birds sometimes. I know, unfortunately, the other day there was quite a rare seabird known as an oyster catcher that had showed up at a dam in the Kruger National Park, much to many birders' excitement. They went to go see it, and it was probably there for a few days before a fish eagle caught it, unfortunately. So the rare bird sighting ended quite rapidly, sadly. Yeah, that does certainly look like a fish eagle. It's funny how he's kind of just left it all of a sudden. He's focusing on cleaning his beak a bit there. I think it's safe to say he's finished his lunch. He clearly ate all his chips before he got to the fish. Nothing like a spot of fish and chips. Kyle, I do agree with your comment. Those are, yeah, they are quite impressive talons. The fish eagle is certainly a very striking and impressive bird. What always surprised me was the first time I saw a bald eagle in person was, I thought a fish eagle was big, but the American bald eagle certainly takes it another level up. But yeah, I don't know what eagle in general actually is not an impressive bird to observe. Their talons and their size, they're just such beautiful animals. Zara, you were asking if African fish eagles ever steal food from other birds. They definitely do. Fish eagles are known a bit for being pirates, essentially. They are, the technical term is called kleptoparasitism, and fish eagles are quite well adapted or adept at it. They'll often harass other birds like herons or cormorants, even other fish eagles. I've seen other fish eagles fighting over a duck they caught. But they'll harass them until the victim drops the fish, and then they'll either snatch it in mid-air or off the water or on the ground. But it's quite a good energy saving tactic. Why work hard for a meal if you can steal it from someone else who's done all the hard work? But it's often why if you see cormorants or herons, if they catch a fish, they'll quickly retreat to a quiet, secluded spot where someone can't steal their food from them, or they'll try to swallow it as quickly as possible. Sky, on the topic of the comparison between a fish eagle and a bald eagle, unfortunately our fish eagle has now gracefully disappeared. But yeah, fish eagles are related to bald eagles. It ties into that conversation we had a bit about old world and new world species. So they do belong to the same genus. So this is, and that genus Haliartus is the group of sea and fish eagles around the world. But since they've evolved on these different continents, it ties into that new and old world terminology. They are similar, but still different. But obviously their habitat and feeding mechanisms are what kind of make them so similar. Now, this is only a few ducks, etc. We're going to pop on over to Tembe, some more Ellie action. Little Tembe, lots of mud baths of elephant mud baths taking place. Got the woolly-necked storks on patrol as always. Don't think these guys ever take a break for looking for unsuspecting frogs. But that's how survival works. You can never be caught sleeping. An interesting question from Jack. You are asking, what is the maximum weight a fish eagle can carry? Just on our fish eagle friend. So generally about up to 2 kgs is carried off. Anything kind of above that, they tend to drag it to the shore. Sometimes you'll actually see them in the water and they kind of flap their way onto shore. Just depends where they are. This can be dangerous because it attracts the attention of crocodiles quite rapidly. But quite impressive. It's, I mean, a bird carrying something like that just with its talons after snatching it in mid-air. Snatching it from the water is quite impressive. Now, see, we've got a nice close-up of one of the foam nest frogs. That nest is quite well positioned right by the pan. Normally they tend to aim for a overhanging branch, but this one will do. I think its only problem is it might be predated a bit heavily when those eggs start to hatch. You see the Egyptian geese are serenading us with the song. It's got an interesting quality to it. I don't know if I'd necessarily call it peaceful, but it does certainly make me think of a aquatic habitat somewhere in Africa. Jade, you were asking why are they nicknamed bishop storks in some parts of Asia and not woolly-necked. So for starters, there was a split that took place. There's now the African woolly-necked stork and the Asian woolly-necked stork. It used to be one species. I haven't heard of the term bishop stork before. I have a strange suspicion that it would have to do with their dark black plumage with their white neck. It almost looks a bit like the collar of a clergyman or a bishop. I will do some reading, but I must say that's a first for me hearing that. I also have obviously never seen the woolly-necked stork in Asia, so I'm not very familiar with the subtle differences, but I think they obviously look quite similar. I must say thank you for that that comment and question. I think it will stick with me for quite a while. I'll keep that in mind next time I see a woolly-necked stork. I think it's quite an apt name or nickname for them. It's always also quite fun with birding if you can come up with nicknames and rhymes. It certainly makes it a lot easier to remember some birds. There's a bird in South Africa called the black-backed puffback, due to the way it puffs its back up when it is displaying to the females. But the Afrikaans name for it is essentially snowball, if you directly translated it. And also a very good name, because they actually look like a little snowball hopping around in the African bush when they're displaying. But all these little wonderful nicknames can be quite helpful when you are starting off on your birding journey. I think between storks and herons or egrets, I always love watching them walk around and foraging. They look very, well, they always remind me of a very well-dressed gentleman strutting around, looking very carefully, but also fosters liking to grab something to eat. Luna, you'd like to know why has their conservation status improved from vulnerable in recent years? That being said, not a bird that you often see at every turn, but yeah, they certainly do appear a lot more outside of protected areas, I've noticed anyway in South Africa, compared to some of the other storks. But the long and the short is, I think their conservation has mainly improved because they've proven to be more adaptable, and that's the thing. Most birds that can adapt or tolerate to the development of mankind, they tend to thrive or start to do better. It was once thought that woolly-necked storks relied heavily on pristine wetlands, but it's noticed, or we've started to see them associating more with farm dams, obviously possibly rice fields in Asia or floodplains. So as long as these areas are not completely lost, but they are protected to some extent, and maybe not the same pristine level, the woolly-necked stork is still able to thrive. But at the same time, there's been a big push globally for better wetland protection. We've started to realize how truly important wetlands are. So just by doing that smaller thing of protecting and looking after wetlands, you not only look or conserve birds like the woolly-necked stork, but a host of other species. So that's always also a big win for conservation. And I think that's also a big reminder for how well we need to look after wetlands. They should not be seen as open spaces to develop on. They should rather be left alone.
My name is Amy, and behind the camera with me is Paul. And I mean, to be able to share it with all of you. Fingers crossed, and I'll make sure I wear my lucky leopard socks as well.
Oh, even a hyena coming into the action as well now. Oh my word! She's stalking the hyena now. Leopard, hyena, lion, all together in one shot. Oh! Woo! This is action-packed.
Join our expert guides at dawn for a live, immersive safari as the bush comes to life.
Found ourselves a chameleon, and look how he's changed colour.
Every sunrise brings new discoveries.
Pound for pound, a leopard is one of the strongest cats around.
Ask questions, share your thoughts, and connect with nature live and in real time.
Great excitement, great happiness.
Start your day with adventure.
Pax, you were asking how do the juveniles differ? I haven't seen too many juveniles, or it's not very noticeable. I was also checking my field guide quick, but I think obviously they're a bit younger, their plumage is a bit more scruffy looking, or that white is maybe not as clean and well developed. But that being said, their plumage is not as clear cut as some of the other striking stork species. But yeah, you probably see a bit of browns and as they start to grow into the rest of their colours. Lena, you were asking why do we often see the woolly-necked storks generally on their own rather than big flocks like other storks? So obviously Aberdeen stork comes to mind, white storks as well. So obviously this is I'd assume this is a breeding pair that they tolerate each other, but you can still see they keep a bit of distance between one another. But it speaks a lot about their feeding habits and how they hunt. So they are they are territorial and clearly solitary feeders, but your other storks at hunting groups, they rely on stuff being flushed out and then grabbing it and essentially in the feeding frenzy, if you could call it that. Whereas the woolly-necked stork's a lot more of a patient and stealth hunter, so they slowly stalk their prey. We can see them moving along the sides of the water's edge here and looking for things. If you had other storks, it would obviously get in the way. It would just be chaotic, and a food resource gets depleted a lot quicker in this way. I must say it's really been a productive session at the waterhole. Many great questions and comments coming into that. I love the enthusiasm and learning and sharing things together. It is ironic how our storks have slightly disappeared there, and we did have an elephant make a brief appearance, but certainly quite a busy day at all the various waterholes with the good weather that's being experienced. There was a question that came in from Mira. If Egyptian geese rarely nest in weird spots like old hammercorp nests or tree holes. I can confirm that. I've seen it myself. I was once on a snare removal morning, and we patrolled near a river, and there was Egyptian geese nesting in trees. But they also will take advantage of a hammercorp nest. Such a big structure like that works well for them. But yeah, it's interesting to see how adaptable birds are. But really fantastic weather and conditions today. From my side, thanks again to everyone who joined. I'm looking forward to being on again tomorrow. I will see you then, and I'm sure we'll have some good sightings. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoon.